Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Home Shop Tips. I'm going to be showing you how to rebuild a Tillotson HL carburetor today. This is off my McCulloch Super 44A. So what you want to do after you take it off the saw, remove the 6 screws around the perimeter of on the bottom of the carburetor. This removes the fuel pump and diaphragm section of the carburetor. Remove these screws if they want to come out. There we go. And then remove the middle screw. I already have that loose, I think. A little bit more. Remove the inlet. Take that off. Under the inlet, you're going to find a fuel filter or a fuel screen, inlet screen. It's either going to be sintered bronze or a fine wire mesh. I found the older ones are wire mesh and the newer ones are sintered bronze. And you just remove the top part like so, and that leaves you with the part of the pump body here, and then the inlet over here, and you can just give this a tap and the the filter will come out along with the gasket. Be careful with those gaskets on the sintered bronze filters, because the carburetor kits come with wider gaskets that are meant for these mesh screens, not the sintered filters. Anyway, then you'll have the fuel pump gaskets. There will be the diaphragm first, thin diaphragm material. Then under that will be a gasket. Carefully lift those up. See, here's the diaphragm first, then the gasket. Then remove the next part. This, you can call it the diaphragm body. Then there's the inlet diaphragm, or the fuel metering diaphragm. You can see this is all crusty and stiff. Wouldn't meter fuel very well if I were to try to use it. And it's kind of hard to see on this one because it's so old, but the diaphragm is on here first, then under the diaphragm is the gasket. Then under that, you'll find the inlet lever. Under that is the inlet screw and inlet seat and the pivot pin. Hold your thumb over the lever because there's a very small spring in there, and if you let that fly loose, you're never going to find it, and you'll have a very, very, very hard time finding a replacement. So you pull that pin out, and you very carefully lift your thumb, and here's the inlet lever. There's the spring, and there's the screw, or I'm sorry, not the screw, the inlet needle, which goes in the inlet. Then you want to remove the inlet. I use a modified 5/16 socket. I modified it by grinding the outside diameter down because the original socket was too wide or too large in diameter to fit inside this part of the carburetor that I'm putting it in. There it came out. And you want to inspect the rubber seat in there, because if it's good, I just use the same inlet seat. The carburetor kits come with a new seat and needle, but they're slightly different, and I haven't been able to make the seat seat into the carburetor well, and I've always found that it leaks in my experience. So I always use these, and they work fine, as long as that rubber seat in there is in good condition. And it is. It was a little bit wet with fuel and oil when I took it apart, so it should be fine. Last thing I want to take apart are the high and low screws, right there. Before you take them out, slowly turn them in and count the number of turns it takes to bottom the screw. Only gently bottom the screw. You don't want to damage the seat. And make a note of that, because that'll give you a very good preliminary setting for the carburetor jet screws when you're putting it back together, so you don't have to mess with it too much. You got a pretty good idea. Take them out, and also remember which screw is which. On this particular carburetor, the high speed screw is a lot longer than the low speed screw, so they're easy to tell apart. Also inspect the rubber O-ring that's on there. These are a little bit chewed up, so I think I might find some new O-rings, because you don't want fuel leaking out or air seeping in past these screws. And that's it. You have pretty much a disassembled carburetor. Clean everything. I clean the outside as well, so I don't contaminate the inside when I handle it. I like to use one of these brushes and give everything a brush down. Spray it off with carburetor cleaner. It's got that handy straw, so I can get into all these little crevices. Make sure to wear safety glasses. If you shoot into that crevice, it'll spray right back at you, and let me tell you, carburetor cleaner burns when it gets in your eyes, and it kind of tastes spicy. Ask me how I know that. So clean this out real good, blow it out with compressed air, and then you can put the screws back in, and then clean out the needle seat and the needle and put them back in here. And if you do use the new needle seat that comes in the kit, when you put the inlet lever back in with the pivot pin and the spring and everything, firstly make sure when you put the pivot pin in to put some sort of a sealant, either gasket shellac or I use Loctite or something on the threads, so air or fuel don't leak past the threads. And also, if you use the new seat, you want to use the sealant on the threads no matter what, but if you use the new seat, make sure that the longer end of the lever here, is flush with this surface of the carburetor body. Otherwise it will not meter fuel correctly. And then on here you place the spacer gasket that spaces the diaphragm away a little bit, and then you put the diaphragm on. These are just the old gaskets. I'm just putting them back on for illustration. So it goes gasket, diaphragm, and then the diaphragm body, and then you go into your rebuild kit and you get the new pump gasket, and the pump gasket goes on. And there's only one way these gaskets can go on, pretty much, because there are these pegs that the gasket sits on. And if you try to go the other way, it won't fit. It's not going to go on. You'll figure it out. So you put that on, then you put on the pump membrane or the pump diaphragm, and then put on the last part, the pump body, with the cleaned out filter and the gasket, and that's it. Again, if you have these sintered bronze gaskets, unless you get a different kit than I do, this gasket is thinner than the gasket they give you in the kit, so you want to make sure not to damage that black gasket there, and then reuse it. You can get away with reusing it. Then you put on the inlet. Make sure you angle the inlet correctly, depending on your saw or whatever engine you're working on. and that's it. That's all there is to it. Oh, of course you would want to put all the screws back in there. And I just let it sit for a little while, let the Loctite or the gasket sealant set, the stuff that you would put on the pivot pin threads. Put it back on the saw, give the saw a prime, and should fire right up and run well if you've cleaned it and reassembled it properly. So that's it. Most important thing, remember to put the gaskets on in the right order and make sure the inlet needle lever is flush with the carburetor body so it emits the proper amount of fuel, and make sure not to lose that spring. And that's it. Oh, and put the jet screws back in. And here's your idle speed adjustment. General idle speed adjustment is back it all the way off and then turn it in until it just barely starts to open the throttle. Just barely. That's a good starting point. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So, I hope this helps you rebuild your Tillotson HL carburetor. And thanks for watching. If you got any questions, send me a message. And come back for more. So long for now.